the most substantial long run is what does it mean to and for Google. I find when I use something like Perplexity, which is a fascinating example, I actually find I click on a lot of those. It's always stuck with me. A comment from a guy called Marshall Simmons, who was the SEO at New York Times.
On today's episode of The Media Plan, we chat with Will Critchlow, the CEO of SearchPilot and a renowned figure in SEO. Will is a serial entrepreneur who co-founded Distilled in 2005, growing it into a successful consultancy and launching the Search Love Conference series. Will has a deep understanding of digital marketing and is a sought-after expert known for his leadership, innovation, and public speaking. I'm thrilled to have Will joining us today, and in this episode, we're going to explore how AI is impacting SEO marketers, the opportunities that AI is ushering in for the channel, and Will's advice for future-proofing yourself as an SEO marketer. AI is impacting marketing, digital, at a whole, but it feels like, particularly with SEO, there's a lot of encroachment from an organic level. So I'm really curious to know, how do you see it from your end? How is AI impacting SEOs, and what do you feel is coming around the corner, and how should SEO marketers be thinking about this in terms of their career and the opportunities for the businesses that they serve?
It's obviously a big deal. I think this in three ways. So I think there's three different effects going on. Probably the most substantial long run is what does it mean to and for Google, or any search engine that you might think of. In particular, some of them obviously some of the pure AI companies are creating their own search engines or search engine competitors. Think SearchGPT, which isn't out yet, for example, from ChatGPT or Perplexity. So that's like the AI overviews, as they're calling them now in Google Organic. That's one effect. Another effect is the proliferation of AI generated content being published on the internet. And for the most part, I think that is right now, that's a huge concern for Google. Can they sort the good content from the duff content? Can they tell when something's actually good versus it just kind of makes the right noises or seems like it could be interesting? And the third effect is almost more the career effect, I guess, the ways that we can use these tools as individuals or as companies or as teams to make us more productive, more effective, whatever else it might be. So taking those briefly individually, I would say the first one is the long run interesting one, but we're not seeing radical effects yet, really, that you can differentiate from all of the other ways that Google is changing. So, there's all of the algorithm updates, helpful content, spam update, core updates, all these things going on all the time. They introduce other search features that affect click-through rate and so forth. So at the moment, AI overviews is just another search feature, but could be very interesting in the longer run. I am fairly bullish that they will strike a good ground or get to a good place for companies that actually sell stuff, right? So if you're an e-commerce retailer or you are a travel site where you can actually buy flights or whatever else it might be, I think those folks are well positioned for this change. Where I think it's going to be more tense is in places like media or affiliates or comparison sites, those kind of things. And I think we need to see where that goes. The second effect, the internet filling up with AI generated nonsense, is a really interesting tactical question, I think, for marketers right now. How far do you go in using these tools in your own content production process? And for me personally, I would say I still want to see a heavy amount of human involvement in that the tools are not good enough yet to produce content that's ready for prime time. And so it almost, at the moment, for me, segues more into the third one, where you're looking for efficiency gains or quality improvements that you can drive from those tools. But I think the other side of that is the one where we're seeing the biggest impact right now, which is Google is scrambling. Google has to scramble to try and maintain search quality in the face of this explosion of, it's not even terrible content. That's the problem. It's like mediocre content. And the fact that that's happening at an unprecedented scale in unprecedented ways. I think that's a real threat to Google, because they have to be able to sort the good stuff out. And that's where we're seeing a lot of this drive for things like helpful content update or spam update as well. So there's definitely a lot going on. Overpinning all of it, I would say my general philosophy to these things is, first is the noise, then the effect. So at the moment, we're still very much in the noise phase. Most of this is marketers talking to marketers about marketing, and the real world impact, for the most part, I think has yet to really be felt.
Yeah, I can tell you that my own behavior has sort of changed. I thought
As a
when
searcher,
Google
you mean?
started, as a consumer, actually,
Yeah.
not even as a marketer, as a consumer, when I first realized Google was, using their AI to help me answer questions more effectively, I thought, oh, this is kind of neat. And then I was watching a YouTube video. It might have been on some business news YouTube channel that talked about Perplexity AI, and a web browser basically built off of large language models that wasn't designed to give you links. It was designed to give you answers. And I personally now probably 50% of my searches are happening on Perplexity AI, just because Google, for the most part, is still giving me links. Sometimes it's giving me answers. Perplexity AI is usually just giving me the answers. Now, I've noticed a nuance in my own behavior when I'm trying to learn about something or just answer a quick question or understand something like, I don't know, how does insurance work for XYZ? Something very top of the funnel, I'll tend to use, these AI assisted platforms. But when I'm like ready to make a buying decision, like I'm currently in Indonesia and I have a villa with a few friends for a month, and then next month I have to find a place on Airbnb. I don't need to go search, I don't have like a broad question or top. I just need to go on Airbnb. If I need to buy something, I just need to go on Amazon. If I'm in market for something, I'll tend to be using Google more. But if I just need a question answered and it's not going to lead to me buying something or making some sort of like important decision at the moment, I'm totally fine using these platforms. So when I see that, I myself, and I'm probably not a representation of most consumers, but when I see my own behavior changing, I'm so curious, what that means.
What that's the leading edge for, right? Yeah, I see all of that, and I've been deliberately experimenting. So I'm atypical in yet another way, where I've just been trying to use different things just to understand it, just to see what's going on. So the latest thing I'm trying is the desktop app for ChatGPT, because you can pull it up with a keyboard shortcut, and it's seamless. It's right there. And I have found that has been increasing my ChatGPT usage again, which had dropped off a little bit. And that's one of the things I found interesting is, I don't know about your experience, but I've found that I've used some of these tools and then I've kind of fallen out of using them and and maybe that's just habit, but kind of fallen back into using Google. A couple of things in different directions. So one is, I find when I use something like Perplexity, which is a fascinating example, I actually find I click on a lot of those links. I don't know what you find your experience to be, but actually one of the things I like about Perplexity compared to, say, ChatGPT is the fact that it has links there to go and follow. And those links, occasionally you can get that from ChatGPT, but I found that to be much better when it's more like a kind of search engine type experience. Conversely, I'm intrigued as to what happens if that kind of bifurcation happens that you're talking about, of like commercial queries go one place and informational stuff goes somewhere else. To what extent can anyone build a business around the informational stuff? Is there a good ads business there? Is there any kind of media business there? What does that play out like? And on the flip side, what does Google's ad business look like when you integrate more AI overviews and so forth? And I think this is somebody was describing it to me this morning, actually, as tools like Perplexity are like the testing ground for Google. Google gets to watch what they do, where they're just playing, right? They don't have a business model to disrupt or to worry about yet. and Google can say, well, this worked, this didn't work, and then they can just, a bit like Instagram did with Snap, right? They can go, oh, Reels look like a great feature. We're going to have Reels in Instagram as well. And I'm really interested in how advertising ends up getting integrated into some of these things. I don't know if you've done any thinking about that, because I know you have a bit more experience, or a lot more experience with the paid side than I do.
I don't have any answers here. I think we're all in uncharted territory, and I can make a ton of speculations, but I'm looking to these companies that are sort of pioneering some of these tech to figure out, first of all, how do they get people's attention and usage on these apps? And I think later on, they're going to figure out some sort of model to monetize, and they might create something that just doesn't even exist right now, in the same way how sort of Reddit is licensing their search data to Google for them to like use and power their systems. So they might develop something that just doesn't even exist, at the moment, in terms of how they monetize that user attention and data.
Yeah. It's also interesting to me what commercial relationships will be allowed to spring up here. I don't know if you've been following some of the antitrust things that have been going on. So Google had this big judgment against them, right? Whenever that was, a couple of weeks ago. And I think there's more coming. I saw a headline, I haven't fully dug into it, that the European regulator is digging even deeper into some of the advertising side of things. And, there's this question of Google has been paying Apple to be the default search engine on iOS devices. That may not be allowed. That might be an abuse of Google's market power. At the same time, in the US, at least, Apple has been found to have market power in the, what do they call it, like the premium smartphone market. And so maybe this is Apple abusing their market power over Google. And there's a lot of weirdness in there. But I think, 15 years ago, we'd have said, oh, well, Perplexity is just going to get acquired by Google. I don't think the regulators would allow that to happen now. And so it is interesting that they're going to discover some of these things, but I think they're also going to be operating in an environment where Google is very much trying to learn from what they've done and incorporate those features, rather than acquiring the company or acquiring the tech, which is maybe what would have happened in decades past.
How do you think an SEO marketer today, that's currently working already in the field, how do they best position themselves to keep delivering value for their clients, but also future-proof themselves with what's happening, in this age of AI? Is there any specific advice that you can share with someone that's starting off versus somebody who's already been working, in their career for, quite some time? So they're very invested in their skill set and their competencies.
I think I'm trying to get to really specific recommendations. I think starting with the general, I think it starts with curiosity. I feel like I've been in the industry for almost 20 years now, and the constant has been change. And the thing that's kept me interested in the industry for that long, frankly, is the amount of change and the amount of innovation. And I've referenced this so many times in different talks, but it's always stuck with me. A comment from a guy called Marshall Simmons, who was the SEO at New York Times way back when, about.com, and now runs Define Media Group, so his own agency specializing in media and news. And he's always called it job security, that Google changing things, or the industry changing, is job security for SEOs, because anyone working in the SEO space should be able to be so far ahead of the general population, and certainly the rest of their potential employers, in understanding what is going on and what's coming down the pipe, that if you can stay curious and you can stay agile and innovate, that is the value you're bringing. The value you're bringing is understanding how are users operating right now, what trends are we seeing, where do we think they're going to be, in the next few months, and remembering that it's fun to pontificate about what 5 years out looks like, but that's not where job security comes from, unless you're a futurologist or something, because companies are investing to win next quarter, next year. Mainly, they're not trying to, for the most part, if you're in an SEO role, your job is not to be like, oh, we're going to kick ass in 10 years, right? The time horizon is a lot shorter than that. And on a shorter time horizon, on a 18 to 24 month horizon, the answer is the future looks a lot like the present. It may not be completely evenly distributed. You may need to figure that things that are just emerging now are going to be more prevalent. But my bet, and I feel fairly confident in saying that the vast majority of sites visibility in 2 years from now is going to look a lot like their current organic visibility. Most sites that do their job well should be able to do to maintain organic search as by far their biggest source of new business.
Do you see any changes happening in terms of opportunities with how SEO gets credit for its role driving outcomes for businesses? Is there anything in particular that you've seen that's interesting, or maybe something that SearchPilot, has been working on internally, or just anything that you've gotten inspiration from in terms of, again, how SEO as a channel gets credit? Because that's fundamentally something that all marketers always struggle with, is understanding what's actually driving media performance within the overall customer journey.
So there's forces in both directions for sure. And I think we saw it at the time, but I'm not sure anybody really has internalized how big of an effect over the last, it's now, I think 13 years since keyword level data went away in analytics, right? So that, for folks who are newer to the industry, it used to be, when I came into the industry, that you could go into your analytics and see individual organic keyword level searches and the conversions that were attributed to those individual searches. Now, Google removed that for privacy reasons. We can get into the whole, the fascinating way that somehow privacy didn't seem to apply to the paid side of things, but that's a whole different argument and debate. But that going away, even though that was almost 15 years ago now, that really set back attribution of organic. I think what we're trying to do at SearchPilot is definitely aligned with improving what you're talking about, the better attribution, and in particular, the attribution of outcomes to effort. So, we did a thing, did that thing work, and how much better off are we as a result of having done that thing, and trying to measure that in the face of all the uncertainty that's going on around you, the changing marketplace, the changing competitive dynamics, the changes from Google, seasonality, site-wide changes, all this other stuff that's going on. That's where we're really focused as SearchPilot, and that's definitely going well. Some forces in the other direction, particularly in Europe, the GDPR is degrading analytics capabilities. And I think it's not necessarily true that it would have had to. There are different ways you can interpret your obligations under the GDPR, but nonetheless, the way people have gone under guidance from their legal teams, presumably, has definitely degraded the analytics experience. And we're starting to see that spill out into other large markets as well. So in the US, mainly driven by the legislations out of California, there's similar kind of wariness around cookies, around personally identifiable information, about consent, about all these kind of things. And one of the worries that I have is that we're going to see folks looking at their analytics data and seeing year-over-year declines that are actually caused by measurement problems rather than real performance degradation, but that they make poor investment choices off the back of what they perceive as this kind of negative impact. And so we're really looking to pull in data from a number of different sources, whether that's Search Console, which is obviously unaffected by cookie level permissions, whether it's old school like hit tracking type stuff, just any kind of sense checking to make sure that we can understand, is the analytics data believed and believable? On the AI side, that's the Wild West right now. There's so little attribution, I think, and so much of it looks like brand, because you're not necessarily even getting the click, as you said. If you just read a recommendation from one of those engines and it tells you that a particular sports brand is a good one, or whatever it might be, it's going to be even harder than in any of the other digital channels to attribute that back to action. And I think that we're seeing that definitely a rise in the big discussion point of the last decade was dark social, right? So folks clicking through from WhatsApp or a private Slack channel, whatever it might be, signal. And yeah, LLMs are like yet another dark channel, I think.
Testing is such a big part of the promise of digital. And obviously, SEO is a channel where we can do a lot of that. And you have an entire business that you've built to facilitate that. I'd be very curious to know if you took the average SearchPilot customer and you had to stack rank some of the key SEO tests that you feel like most of them would benefit from. Is there some tests that come to mind? And you can feel free to break this down if they're, whether it's like B2C versus B2B or like enterprise versus like startup. Is there common tests that you're like, oh, out of the gate, these are the 2 or 3 that would reveal probably the most impact?
Obviously, it always depends a little bit on the circumstance of the business and what they've done well or badly in the past. But kind of setting that to one side, I would say I'm going to pick 2 kinds of things, and they're completely opposite ends of the complexity spectrum. So at one end, it's kind of at the basics, but title testing is so underused in the market generally, and extremely powerful. One of the reasons it's extremely powerful is it's the title of an HTML page, literally in the title tag in the head of the HTML, is one of the very few HTML elements that affects both what you rank and where you rank on the page, and the click-through rate that you get when you rank, because it's typically either the included in the snippet for you to click on, or heavily influencing what Google ends up writing in that snippet that you end up clicking on. So it affects the click-through rate. It's essentially your little kind of organic advert, if you like, the snippet in the organic search results. But it also affects whether you rank there and how well you rank. And it's by being that kind of double threat, it's extremely powerful. And I would say title tests are, I think I'm right in saying, still our most consistently impactful, right? We can't say whether they're going to be positive or negative, but they will have an impact in one direction or the other more often than basically any other element on the page. And this is probably relatively unsurprising to anybody who comes from a paid search background, because prior to things like PMAX and so forth, such a huge part of the paid search job was optimizing the paid search advert, right? And you think about the job of a paid search marketer in 2010, a huge part of it was writing advert variations. And that's something that has never really spilled over into organic search in a way that's kind of surprised me. And we've had this technology now for 6 or 7 years, and even it's still taking time to build up, and that it's still a source of huge opportunity. And it's also one of those areas where there's a lot of creativity possible. It's not just a binary outcome. It's not just like, well, shall I have this title or that title? The realm of human creativity is kind of endless, right? You can always try and beat your current title. And so there's a huge well of opportunities in that direction, but they're simple. They're quite easy to execute. The other extreme that I would call out is internal linking. And this is much more pure SEO compared to something that has paid search analogies. This is the idea that links are the original powerful insight that Google had. This idea that it's not just what you say about your own website, what you say about yourself, but what others say about you. So what those external links to your website from other people's websites, are the original ranking factor that set Google apart from the other search engines that existed at the time. And that was the kind of source of their academic insight that led to the market power that they had, and that led to kind of everything else that came after that. The fascinating kind of corollary of that is that internal links also matter, because the way that they measure the effect of link authority and link power is by following all those links. And if they only follow links to your website and don't follow the internal links, they hit a dead end. So they have to follow internal links as well. And so those links, that linking structure of your website is incredibly important. So imagine a large website, say something with geographic locations, right? So think you're searching, I don't know, plumbers in Denver, or whatever it might be. And you think about the kind of website that would target those search queries across the whole United States. There's a lot of questions that you might have about when you're on that page, to what extent should it link to other services in the same geographic region, right? Electricians or plasterers, whatever it might be. And to what extent should it link to related local geographic areas? And you can imagine that just blowing out of scale so quickly. Like you could link to thousands of relevant pages from that one, but if you do that, you'll probably end up in a downward slope of diminishing returns, if not negative returns. And so that question of what should our internal linking structure look like, which pages should we link to from these pages, is a hugely difficult academic question. Trying to answer that in the abstract is incredibly, basically impossible, effectively impossible, partly because it's a huge computational problem, and partly because we don't know how Google is actually going to treat these things. And so that's an area where you kind of end up having to test, and yet it's one of the more complex tests that we ever have to run, because you have to measure the effect on the website as a whole, the source of the link, the target of the link, without getting too deep in the weeds. It's super complex. So yeah, I'd pick those two. I'd pick titles and I'd pick internal links.
A question that I have often been asked in my role as a media buyer, which I think you're in a good position to give us the other side of it, is how does organic SEO and paid PPC converge? Is there a role between, like, is there synergy that can happen between organic teams and paid teams? I usually get asked this question, and I've struggled over the years to give good answers to different clients. But I'd be curious to know, from your perspective, where is there synergy? What does that look like?
It's an untapped synergy, in my experience. I think it sounds like you've been in a similar place to me, where folks ask this question, and then, in my experience, the answer has been underinvested in. And I think there's a few things off the top of my head, a few different kind of ways that there could or should be some synergies. You can imagine that there are certain areas where paid search can be the beachhead, right? You can appear for paid searches that you don't rank for organically, and ranking for those organically is going to take some time and some effort. Whereas with a bit of hand waving and a bit of kind of acknowledging that I'm oversimplifying, you could throw up a landing page and get a paid search ad running today. And so there's a little bit of an opportunity for paid to be the MVP, for paid to be the kind of, is this a profitable area of visibility? Should we be investing in this new area? And to test the waters before going in with the SEO investment. And because the interesting thing to my mind is, businesses don't think about these correctly from a financial perspective often enough, because media buying is essentially an expense, typically a cost of sales, right? You're spending money to acquire a specific set of customers, whereas organic search is much more of an investment. And I don't mean that to say it's better, right? There are times when it's better and worse to have an expense or to have an investment, but it's much more of a capital investment. You're spending money upfront to build an asset that you hope is going to pay off over the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And it kind of needs to depreciate in the same way. And so financially, you should be treating it more like building plant or building an asset than it is a cost of sales. And although organic search can, in the long run, be cheaper per click when you amortize the cost over the whole lifetime of that page that you've built, it's a big upfront cost. And so paid search is going to be super expensive per click eventually, but it can be a lot cheaper to test the waters. So the first thing is that brands ought to test the water with paid and then invest in organic if it looks like a profitable endeavor. There's definitely a case for both, as in they can sit alongside each other. There's quite a few brand uplift studies that show that you can outperform, like doing both at once outperforms doing either under many different situations. And so I think I'd love to see more investment in proving that, which involves coordinated testing between the organic team and the paid team. Conversely, there are also times when the incremental benefit of advertising isn't there when you consider the effect of organic. If you just naively turn your paid on and off, you might easily prove that paid is worth having on. But what you might not realize is when you're turning off the paid, some of those clicks might go to organic, especially if you rank position 1 or position 2. And so what you're not capturing, if you're just doing a paid search test, is the corresponding impact on organic search. And again, it's just that kind of holistic testing. We have 1 or 2 customers who have dabbled in this area, but honestly, it's an underinvested area. And I'd love to see more folks getting curious about it, because I do think there have to be opportunities. That the challenge from our side, and I'd be very interested to hear what your clients ask for. The challenge from our side is we typically only ever hear this when folks want to cut their paid budget. They come to organic saying, "Hey, can you help us spend less on paid?" And the answer may or may not be yes, but it's a mindset where you're looking for one specific answer to a specific problem, and tends to point to other problems in the business, right? Why are they cutting the budget anyway, especially in such an attributable, like performance channel? Why is this a thing? And so I feel like we're often brought into those experiments from a position of weakness rather than a position of curiosity.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of ways that teams can create synergy. I know that one way in the past that I've often mentioned the opportunity is, let's say, maybe a little bit less from an SEO perspective and from a conversion rate optimization perspective. Like if you're spinning up different landing pages or pages that you intend to sort of build that asset long term, and you want to get a quick sense of what's resonating so that you can, you have a finite amount of resources. Yep. Should we use landing page A that has, this banner and this format, or should we use, our other approach? That could be an easy opportunity to create a split test, run some paid ads, and get some early signs to help you decide what you should sort of invest in. I think another opportunity also is kind of what you pointed out to in terms of identifying the categories and terms that you want to play in, and then auditing yourself within that category to determine where are we already present organically, or where do we think we can win organically that we're not, in position 1, right, 2, and 3, and where are the positions that we're going to struggle to, or that investment right now doesn't make sense, or we're unsure of the long-term commitment that we have around that category of terms or those terms specifically, and maybe that's where we play with paid specifically. So I think, to your point, yeah, there is definitely some opportunity. Shifting gears a little bit, and going back to this topic of, what does an SEO marketer do in this situation? I know there's many fields that are not as volatile as what we've seen with media and technology in the last 5 years, decade. There's many fields that someone, becomes a lawyer today, not much is going to change in their career. Technology is not going to make or break what they do. It's going to impact them quite minimally. But in media, with the convergence of mad tech and marketing tech, we are, very tied to emerging technologies. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to yourself today if you were starting, from scratch as an SEO marketer? Is there something that you would do different, or is there something in particular that you think would be very critical for you to sort of participate in this next stage of what an SEO marketer can be?
I think I'd probably draw a distinction between if I was trying to start an agency today, and for the record, I'm 100% not. I've done that, been there. Then I think there's a lot of scope for being super cutting edge around some of this stuff, helping folks understand. And I would define search in the broadest sense. I would encompass in search people doing ChatGPT queries, not even search GPT, regular ChatGPT, obviously Perplexity, like all of these things, and look at that kind of holistic approach and strategy. It makes for great conference presentations, makes for great interesting engagements with senior people. But in terms of effectiveness, Google is still just a behemoth. And I think that my advice would probably don't get too caught up in the shiny new search engines. Focus your effort on the way the tools can make you more productive at doing the old-fashioned stuff, right? I don't mean old-fashioned. I mean 5 years ago stuff. Because I don't know if you've seen some of the data that's come from SparkToro, and Rand has published a load of things around just how much of the referral traffic comes from Google. Like, we forget just quite how dominant Google is. And for an effectiveness play, I would be saying, no, like, I'm 100% all in on regular organic search. And in fact, I mean, I kind of am. I'm talking my own book here because I have put my money where my mouth is. SearchPilot is very focused on regular organic SEO. And so I suppose to take that to its logical conclusion, what I literally am telling people to do is consider organic search treat it as the biggest channel that it is, but test it, move it to a more of a performance channel. And the language that I've been using recently that's been resonating with a lot of senior folks who oversee both channels, paid and organic, is that what we're trying to do is we're turning organic search into that kind of performance channel. We're turning it into a channel that you can understand and manage in a way that is much more like the way that you've understood and managed your media spend in the past.
Will, where can our listeners and watchers stay connected to you? And do you have any upcoming speaking engagements that they can look out for?
So I am Will Critchlow, all one word, on most of the social places. I don't do TikTok and the like, but I'm certainly active on Twitter, X, Threads, and LinkedIn. And that's the best way to reach me is any of those. My DMs tend to be open on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So that's a pretty good way if anybody needs to reach out to me. I do some of my own streaming, and folks can find that on the SearchPilot YouTube channel, as well as my own social platforms. And yeah, in general, fairly easy to find in those different places.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a blast. Thank you.